The village of Greek was known for its harmony. The rivers ran clear, the forests were rich with game, and the people lived in peace. But beneath the surface of even the most peaceful places, shadows lurked. Two women, Miriam and Halima, had been friends since childhood. They shared everything: laughter, secrets, and dreams. But as they grew older, their lives took different paths. Miriam was married to Hassan, a brave and respected hunter. Their marriage was filled with love, laughter, and companionship. Hassan adored her, always bringing home the finest meat from his hunt, and Miriam made sure their home was warm and welcoming. Alima, on the other hand, had never been married. She did not believe in love. To her, men were a burden, and marriage was a cage. One evening, as they sat outside Miriam's hut, weaving baskets, Alima clicked her tongue and shook her head. Miriam, you are too soft-hearted, she said, her voice laced with disapproval. Why do you let Azan have so much control over you? Miriam looked at her friend in confusion. Control? What do you mean? You cook for him. You wait for him. You smile when he speaks. You are always so obedient. Are you his wife or his servant? Halima sneered. Miriam chuckled. Halima, he is my husband. This is how love works. We take care of each other. Halima scoffed. That is what they tell women like you. But men, they take advantage. If you don't show him you can stand on your own, he will start treating you like a slave. One day, you will forget your worth. Miriam frowned, her friend's words coiling around her mind like a creeping vine. I don't think Hassan is like that. All men are like that, Halima insisted, her eyes dark with certainty. Just test him. Refuse to cook for him one night. Tell him you're tired. Watch how he reacts. Miriam sighed, unsure, but Halima had planted a seed. That night, when Hassan returned from his hunt, she did not greet him with her usual warm embrace. Instead, she remained seated by the fire, arms crossed. Hassan frowned. Miriam, my love, is something wrong? She shrugged. Must something be wrong for a woman to want her own space? Hassan studied her, concern flashing in his eyes. I never said that. You just seemed different tonight. Miriam turned away, letting silence settle between them. Hassan sighed and sat down to eat alone. In the darkness, Halima smiled to herself. The crack had formed. Now she only needed to make it wider. Miriam barely slept that night. Halima's words replayed in her head like a drumbeat. One day, he will forget your words. Hassan had noticed her change in behavior. He had asked if she was all right. Shouldn't that be enough? But instead of feeling reassured, doubt had taken root in her heart. At dawn, she went to fetch water from the river. The morning mist curled around her ankles as she walked the narrow path, carrying her calabash. As she bent down to fill it, Halima appeared beside her, silent as a shadow. So, what did he do? Halima asked, a sly smile playing on her lips. Miriam hesitated. Nothing. He just asked if I was all right. Halima let out a short laugh. Oh, Miriam, how naive you are. That is how it starts. Today he asks, tomorrow he does not. Then one day he will serve his food and he will not even look at you. It is the way of men. Miriam's grip tightened around the calabash. You must teach him a lesson before it is too late, Halima continued. Refuse to do something for him again today. Make him feel small, just for once, so he remembers that you are not his property. Miriam frowned. This did not feel right. But Halima was her friend, and friends wanted the best for each other. That evening, when Hassan returned from hunting, he greeted her with a warm smile. My love, I caught a fat antelope today. You will love it. Miriam looked at him coldly. Then cook it yourself. Hassan blinked, confused. Is something wrong, my love? I am not your cook, Hassan. The words left her lips before she could take them back. A deep silence settled between them. Hassan's face darkened, not in anger, but in hurt. He stepped back as if realizing for the first time that something was truly wrong. Miriam, when did we start speaking to each other like this? She had no answer. That night, she lay awake, staring at the roof of their hut, while Hassan slept with his back turned to her. For the first time since their marriage, an invisible wall stood between them, and outside the hut, under the glow of the moon, Alima stood watching, a triumphant smile on her lips. The crack had widened. The days that followed were filled with silence. Miriam felt it every time she looked at Hassan. He still spoke to her, still greeted her in the morning, but something had changed. His warmth, his laughter, both seemed to be fading, like smoke disappearing into the air. She told herself she was right to listen to Alima. A man must know that his wife is not weak. But still, a strange emptiness sat in her heart. One afternoon, as Miriam pounded yam outside her hut, Alima approached, carrying a woven basket filled with roasted groundnuts. She sat beside her, cracked a nut between her teeth, and gave Miriam a knowing look. "You are learning fast," Alima said, her voice smooth like river water. Miriam did not respond. "He has stopped smiling as much, hasn't he?" Miriam's hand paused on the pestle. "Good," Alima continued. "That means he is beginning to fear losing you." Ali- Miriam bit her lip. Fear. She had never wanted Hassan to fear her. She only wanted him to love her, to remember how lucky he was to have her. "A man who does not know a woman's worth will take her for granted," Alima went on, lowering her voice. "Did you know? My cousin's husband married another wife just because she was too soft for him." Miriam's breath caught. "Yes," Alima whispered, leaning in. One day, he stopped noticing her, and then before she knew it, another woman was sharing her home, eating her food, sleeping where she once slept. Miriam's heart pounded. The thought of another woman in her place made her stomach twist. "Do not let that happen to you, Miriam," Alima warned, placing a hand on her shoulder. "You must take control before it is too late." Miriam stared at the ground, troubled. She remembered just how a few weeks ago Hassan would wrap his arms around her from behind, his deep laughter filling their hut. She remembered the way his eyes would soften when he watched her cook, as if she was the most precious thing in this world. But now there was distance and doubt. Maybe, maybe Alima was right. Maybe she has been too soft. Maybe Hassan has already grown tired of her. That night, when Hassan returned from his hunting trip, he sat beside Miriam as she prepared their evening meal. His voice was gentle and careful. "Miriam, my love, have I done something to upset you?" For a brief moment, Miriam wanted to say, "No, my love, hold me. Let us go back to how we were." But then she remembered Halima's words. She straightened her back. "If you do not know, then perhaps it is not important." Hassan's face fell. He sighed deeply, then picked up his food and ate it in silence. Outside in the shadows, Halima watched from a distance, a sly smile curving on her lips. The crack had become a wound. Hassan woke up before the sun, as he always did, but something was different. The air between him and Miriam was thick, suffocating. She lay on the mat beside him, her back turned, her breath slow and steady. In the past, she would have stared at the sound of his movements, reaching out to him with a sleepy smile. But now there was only silence. Hassan exhaled and ran a hand over his face. Something was wrong, but no matter how many times he searched his mind, he could not find his crime. Did she not love him anymore? Did she regret marrying him? The thought sent a sharp ache through his chest. Outside, the village was already coming to life. The distant sound of women pounding yam, the laughter of children, the rustling of palm trees as the wind whispered through them. Hassan rose quietly, not wanting to disturb Miriam, and stepped outside to prepare for the day's hunt. But he was not alone. Halima was waiting. She stood under the shade of a mango tree, her wrapper tied tightly around her waist, her arms folded as if she had been expecting him. The moment Hassan saw her, something in his gut twisted. He did not trust this woman, this friend of his wife who always seemed too close, too involved. "Good morning, Hassan," she greeted, her voice smooth like honey dripping from a comb. He nodded. "Good morning, Halima." She took a step forward, lowering her voice as if she carried a secret too dangerous to say aloud. "Forgive me, but I must speak." Hassan frowned. "About what?" Halima sighed dramatically, shaking her head. "Miriam has changed, hasn't she?" His body stiffened. "She's just tired," he said, forcing calmness into his voice. Halima gave him a pitying look. "No, Hassan. It is not tiredness. It is something worse." Hassan narrowed his eyes. "What are you saying?" Halima leaned in, as if afraid the wind might carry her words away. "Miriam is beginning to resent you." A cold chill crept down Hassan's spine. "That is a lie," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. Halima sighed again, shaking her head. "I have tried to defend you, Hassan. I have told her that you love her, that you are a good husband. But Miriam listened to no one." Hassan clenched his fist. "She believes you are becoming weak," Halima continued, her words slow and deliberate. "She thinks you take her for granted, that you do not deserve her loyalty." Hassan's jaw tightened. "Miriam, is Miriam taught these things?" "I should not be telling you this," Halima added, looking around nervously. "But I cannot watch you suffer. You're a good man, Hassan. You deserve better." The words sank into Hassan's mind like venom. Halima placed her hand on his arm, her touch light but lingering. "Think about what I have said, Hassan, and be careful. The woman who once loved you may not be the same woman now." And with that, she turned and walked away, leaving Hassan standing there, his heart pounding. Doubt, dark and poisonous, took root in his chest. That night, when he returned home, Miriam smiled at him, but Hassan did not smile back. The poison had begun to spread. Hassan sat by the fire that night, sharpening his hunting knife, but his mind was elsewhere. Alima's words echoed in his head like the beating of a talking drum. "Miriam is beginning to resent you. She believes you are weak. You deserve better." Hassan stole a glance at Miriam, who sat across from him, weaving a basket. Her fingers moved quickly, the flickering firelight casting shadows on her face. She looked so normal, so much like the woman he had always loved. But was she? Had she truly changed? Was she hiding something from him? "Hassan!" Miriam's voice broke through his thoughts. He looked up, startled. "Yes?" She hesitated, then smiled. "You have been quiet tonight. Is something wrong?" Hassan studied her carefully. Was her concern genuine, or was it just an act? He wanted to ask her if she still loved him, if she still respected him. He wanted to ask if she thought he was weak. Instead, he forced a small smile. "I am just tired." Miriam's smile faded slightly, but she nodded. "Then you should rest. Tomorrow will be a long day." She reached for a bowl of stew she had prepared earlier and handed it to him. Hassan hesitated. Was it the same woman Halima had warned him about? "She thinks you do not deserve her loyalty." His stomach tightened. "Hassan," Miriam's voice was soft, but there was a trace of worry in it. "I am not hungry," he muttered, pushing the bowl aside. Miriam frowned. "But you have not eaten all day." "I said I am not hungry," he snapped. Miriam blinked in surprise. Then slowly she set the bowl down. "All right," she said quietly, turning her attention back to the basket. Silence stretched between them, thick and heavy. Hassan should have apologized. He should have told her that he was just tired, just distracted, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, he watched her, searching for signs of resentment, of hidden anger, but all he saw was his wife, the same woman who had once held his face in her hands and promised to stand by him forever, the same woman who had laughed with him under the moonlight, who had kissed him in the rain. Had she truly changed? Or had Halima planted a seed of doubt in his heart? Hassan clenched his jaw. He did not know anymore. But one thing was certain. Something had shifted between them, and he did not know if they would ever be the same again. He lay awake long after the fire had died down, staring at the thatched roof of their hut. Miriam's steady breathing beside him should have been a comfort, but tonight it felt distant, like a river that once flowed freely, but had now changed its course. He turned slightly, watching her in the faint moonlight that seeped through the cracks in the wall. She looked peaceful, her face softened in sleep. She thinks you are weak. She resents you. Alima's words refused to leave his mind. Hassan sat up quietly, careful not to wake Miriam. His chest felt tight. He needed air. Slipping out of the hut, he walked towards the edge of the compound. The village was silent, save for the occasional hoot of an owl and the distant murmur of the river. He leaned against a tree, trying to steady his thoughts. Hassan! He turned sharply, his heart pounding. Halima stood a few steps away, her arms folded across her chest. You could not sleep either, she asked, stepping forward. Hassan exhaled, rubbing a hand over his face. No. Halima tilted her head, studying him. It is because of Miriam, isn't it? Hassan frowned. Why do you say that? Halima gave a small, knowing smile. Because I know you, Hassan, and I know what it feels like to be trapped in a marriage where you are not valued. Hassan's jaw tightened. I am not trapped. Halima sighed, stepping closer. Then, why do you look so troubled? Why are you out here in the cold night instead of lying beside your wife? Hassan looked away. He did not have an answer. Halima touched his arm gently. You deserve a woman who appreciates you, Hassan. A woman who sees your worth. Hassan swallowed hard. He had always seen Halima as a friend and nothing more. But tonight, there was something different in her eyes, something unsettling. Do not let doubt eat you alive, Hassan, she whispered. You know the truth in your heart. Miriam is not the same woman she used to be. And maybe, just maybe, she never truly loved you at all. Hassan felt a cold shiver crawl down his spine. Was Halima right? Had Miriam's love for him faded? Or was he simply being led into a trap he could not yet see? As Halima stepped even closer, her voice like honey in the night, Hassan realized something. The real danger might not be Miriam at all. It might be standing right in front of him. Hassan could still feel Halima's fingers lightly resting on his arm. A simple touch, but it carried weight, like a whisper of wind before a coming storm. You should go inside, he muttered, taking a step back. It is late. Halima didn't move. Instead, she tilted her head slightly, her dark eyes unreadable in the moonlight. You don't trust me, do you? Hassan hesitated. That's not. It's all right. Halima interrupted softly, her lips curving into a small smile. I understand. Trust is not given easily, and I know how much you love Miriam. Hassan's chest tightened at her words. Yes, he loved Miriam, didn't he? But love should not be blind, Hassan. Halima continued, stepping closer again. A woman who loves her husband does not speak to him the way Miriam does. She does not make him feel small. Hassan clenched his feet. He had never spoken of his pain to anyone, not even to himself. But Halima's words were carving into his doubts, making them bigger, deeper. You deserve a woman who will build you up, not one who will tear you down, Halima whispered. Someone who will stand by you, not look down on you. Hassan exhaled sharply. That is enough, Halima. She studied him for a moment, then gave a slow nod. Very well. Turning on her heel, she started walking away. But before she disappeared into the shadows, she cast him one last glance. "You will see the truth soon enough, Hassan. I only hope it will not be too late." Then she was gone. Hassan stood there for a long time, staring at the empty space she had left behind. The night felt colder now. Inside the hut, Miriam stared as he returned. He lay beside her, his mind racing. "You deserve a woman who will build you up." Miriam is not the same woman she used to be. Maybe she never truly loved you at all. Alima's words wrapped around him like creeping vines. He closed his eyes. Sleep did not come. He woke to the sound of distant thunder rumbling across the sky. The air inside the hut was thick and heavy, mirroring the unease in his heart. He turned to look at Miriam, who lay beside him, her chest rising and falling in deep sleep. For the first time, he studied her eyes carefully, the soft curve of her face, the gentle rise of her lips. This was the woman he had once fought for, the woman he had dreamed of sharing a life with. But now, there was a weight between them, a distance he had never noticed before, or perhaps one he had refused to acknowledge. Alima's voice echoed in his mind. "You deserve a woman who will build you up, not one who will tear you down." Hassan shook his head, frustrated with himself. Why was he letting Alima's words take root in his heart? He had always known who Miriam was, strong-willed, sharp-tongued, but never cruel. Hadn't she always stood by him in their hardest moments? Yet, something had changed. Or had it always been this way and he was only now realizing it? Miriam stared in her sleep, her lips parting slightly. Hassan hesitated, then reached out and brushed a stray brand from her face. Her eyes fluttered open. "Hassan," she murmured, her voice heavy with sleep. "Go back to sleep, Miriam," he whispered. But she frowned, her brows knitting together. "What is wrong?" Hassan hesitated. He wanted to tell her about Halima, about the doubt creeping into his mind. But something held him back. Would she even listen? Or would she dismiss his worries as she always did? "Nothing," he finally said. Miriam studied him for a moment, her gaze sharp even in the dim moonlight. Then she turned over, her back to him. Hassan lay there, staring at the ceiling. The storm outside was growing stronger. The wind howled through the trees, shaking the earth with its fury, and inside him a storm was raging as well. He didn't know it yet, but the seeds of doubt had taken its root already, and soon they would bloom into something neither he nor Miriam could control. The next morning, Hassan rose before the sun. He could not bear to lie beside Miriam any longer, not when his heart felt heavy with doubt. He stepped outside, inhaling the crisp morning air as the village slowly stirred to life. Smoke from cooking fires curled into the sky, and the distant chatter of women fetching water filled the air. But his mind was elsewhere. Halima. Her words had planted something inside him, something he couldn't ignore. "You deserve better. She doesn't respect you. Is this the life you truly want?" As if summoned by his thoughts, he spotted Halima near the marketplace, a bright wrapper swaying as she walked. She was speaking to another woman, laughing, her face alight with warmth. When her gaze met Hassan's, she gave him a knowing smile and excused herself from the conversation. "Hassan," she greeted, tilting her head. "Did you sleep well?" Hassan sighed. "Hmm, I don't know anymore." Halima reached out, placing a gentle hand on his arm. "You look troubled." He hesitated, but something about her touch, her concern, made him speak. "Do you think a man should feel lost in his own home?" Halima's expression softened. "A home is supposed to be a place of peace, not a battlefield." Hassan let her words sink in. Peace. He could hardly remember the last time his home had felt peaceful. Halima sighed. "Hassan, I have known you since we were children. I have seen your heart, your kindness, your strength. But lately, I see a man weighed down by a burden he should not carry alone. Hassan looked away. He shouldn't be here. He shouldn't be listening. But he stayed. You deserve a woman who speaks life into you, not one who drains you, Alima continued softly. Something in the way she spoke, so full of certainty, made Hassan feel exposed, vulnerable, and for the first time, he allowed himself to wonder, what if she was right? What if he had been blind all along? Before he could respond, the sound of approaching footsteps made him turn. Miriam stood a short distance away, watching them. Her face was unreadable, but her eyes burned with something dark. Hassan's stomach tightened. She had seen, and though nothing had happened, something between them had already shifted. Miriam turned on her heel and walked away, her silence louder than any accusation. Hassan knew in that moment that a storm was coming, and this time he wasn't sure if his marriage would survive it. The silence in Hassan's home that evening was suffocating. Miriam had not spoken a word since she saw him with Alima earlier that day. She moved around their hut, her actions sharp and deliberate, placing a calabash down other than necessary, stirring the evening soup with unnecessary force. Hassan watched her from the doorway, arms crossed over his chest. He had known this moment was coming. He had prepared himself for the confrontation. But now that he was here, staring at his wife's stiff back, he felt uneasy. Finally, Miriam turned, her eyes locked onto his, and the fire in them was undeniable. "Do you love her?" she asked. The question hit him like a stone. "What? Do you love Halima?" Hassan inhaled sharply. "Miriam, what kind of question is that? The kind a wife asks when she finds her husband whispering with another woman in the market." Her voice was controlled, but the fury behind it was unmistakable. Hassan sighed, rubbing his temple. "Nothing happened, Miriam. Alima she was just talking to me." "Talking to you? About what? About how unworthy I am? About how she would make a better wife?" Hassan hesitated. That pause, small as it was, made Miriam's lip curl in bitter amusement. "Ha!" she murmured. "So she did." "Miriam, listen." "No, Hassan," she snapped. "You listen. I have known Alima for years. I have seen how she looks at you, how she smiles at you, and I have heard the way she speaks about me, always planting seeds of doubt, always making you question me." Hassan clenched his jaw. "She only said what I was already feeling." The words slipped out before he could stop them. Miriam's breath itched. For the first time that night, something like hot flickered in her eyes. "So that's what this is. You believe her?" Hassan exhaled, frustrated. "Miriam, our marriage has not been peaceful. We argue. We fight. You challenge me at every turn. Because I am not a woman who will bow just because society says I should," she shouted. "I am your wife, not your servant." Hassan closed his eyes for a moment. He had always known Miriam was strong-willed, but lately he had begun to wonder if their love was enough to hold them together. "And what do you want, Hassan?" she asked, softer now. "Do you want peace or do you want submission?" He opened his mouth, but no words came. Miriam stared at him for a long moment, then let out a dry, humorless laugh. "Ha ha ha! You don't even know, do you?" She turned away, shoulders stiff with anger and pain. "Sleep wherever you want tonight," she muttered. "I don't care." Hassan watched her disappear into the back of their hut, his heart heavy with the weight of his own uncertainty. Outside, the wind howled through the trees. A storm was indeed coming, and this time, he was no longer sure if he was ready for it. Hassan could not sleep. He lay on his mat, staring at the thatched roof above him. listening to the distant croaking of frogs and the rustling of leaves outside. Miriam's words echoed in his mind, sharp, unrelenting. Do you want peace or do you want submission? He had always believed a husband should lead, that a wife should follow. But Miriam had never been one to simply follow. And now, Halima had poisoned his mind with doubt, forcing him to see his wife as a problem rather than a partner. The more he thought about it, the more uneasy he felt. Miriam had been right about one thing. Halima had never been a true friend to her. She had always found subtle ways to belittle Miriam, to make her feel unworthy, and now Hassan had let her words slip into his heart like venom. He sighed, turning over on the mat. Sleep refused to come. Then he heard it, a faint rustling outside. His body tensed. The movement was too soft, too deliberate to be the wind. Someone was out there. Hassan sat up, straining his ears. The sound came again, near the side of the hut, where the small window was. Slowly, he rose to his feet, careful not to make a sound. He reached for his machete, which lay beside the doorway. The village had been peaceful for many years, but no man was foolish enough to sleep without a weapon nearby. With measured steps, he moved toward the window and peered out. The moon was high, casting a pale glow over the village. Shadows stretched long and hairy against the ground. At first he saw nothing, but then a figure, draped in a dark wrapper, crouched low behind a banana tree. Hassan's grip tightened on the machete. Who was watching his home at this hour? Then the figure shifted slightly, and a strand of familiar braided hair slipped into the moonlight. His breath caught in his throat. It was Halima. A wave of confusion and unease washed over him. Why was she lurking outside his hut in the dead of the night? Before he could think, Halima turned her head slightly, her gaze scanning the compound. Then she rose and moved swiftly toward the back of the hut, towards the entrance where Abeni slept. Hassan's heart pounded. This was not a coincidence. He moved quickly, stepping outside as silently as possible. The cool night air wrapped around him, but his skin burned with tension. As he rounded the hut, he saw her, standing near the entrance, her hand lifting towards the wooden door. "Halima," he said, his voice low but firm. She froze. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then she returned to him, a slow, sly smile spreading across her face. "Hassan," she whispered, "you should not be awake." His grip on the machete tightened. "And you should not be here." She took a step closer, her eyes gleaming in the moonlight. "I came to warn you." "Warn me about what?" "About your wife." Hassan's stomach twisted. "What are you talking about?" Halima leaned in slightly, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Miriam is not who you think she is. She is dangerous, Hassan. I have heard things, seen things. You must be careful." Hassan frowned. "You expect me to believe that?" Halima sighed, shaking her head. "I know you love her, but love can blind a man. You should ask yourself, why do the elders always look at her with weary eyes? Why do the women whisper when she passes?" Hassan has heard whispers before, but he has always dismissed them. Miriam was strong-willed, independent. Many in the village did not like women who spoke their minds. But now, under the cold light of the moon, with Halima standing before him like a dark omen, doubt slithered into his mind. "Think about it, Hassan," Miriam murmured. "Think about it, Hassan," Halima murmured, stepping back into the shadows, "before it is too late." Then, without another word, she slipped into the night, leaving Hassan standing there, heart pounding, mind racing. Behind him, the door creaked softly. Miriam was awake. Had she heard? Did she already know? And if she did, what would she do next? Frozen outside his hut, his heart drumming against his ribs. Alima's words lingered in his mind like the smoke of a dying fire, dark, clinging, impossible to ignore. You should ask yourself, why do the elders always look at her with weary eyes? A soft creak behind him made him turn. The wooden door to the hut had shifted slightly, just enough for him to see Miriam's silhouette standing in the dim glow of the moon. Hassan, her voice was quiet, steady. Why are you standing out there? Hassan hesitated. He glanced back towards the shadows where Alima had disappeared, then turned his gaze to his wife. The flickering lights from the small oil lamp inside their hut cast shadows on her face. I heard something. Someone was outside. Miriam's lips pressed together, and for a brief moment something flickered in her gaze. Was it fear or suspicion? Who? It was Halima. Miriam's expression darkened. Why was she here? Azan didn't know how to answer. He wanted to tell her the truth, that Halima had tried to turn him against her. She came to warn me about you. Miriam went still. The air between them grew heavy. Then slowly she turned back to him. And do you believe her? Azan swallowed hard. The truth was he didn't know what to believe anymore. I don't know what to think, Miriam. I have heard the whispers before, and tonight she asked me why the elders always look at you with weary eyes. Miriam let out a slow breath, as if she had been expecting this moment for a long time. She took a step towards him, lowering her voice. You want the truth? She asked. Hassan nodded, his throat dry. Miriam reached for the small wooden stool in the corner and sat down, her fingers gripping the edge of her wrapper. For the first time since they got married, Hassan saw something unfamiliar in her eyes. Not fear, not anger, but weariness. I have never hidden who I am, Hassan, she began, but the village prefers whispers over truth. Hassan frowned. What do you mean?